Good evening. I've had an immense amount of requests for this tackle talk, which, in all transparency, I've already done once. But I think it's fair at this point to revisit it with a hindsight is 2020 type lens and talk about the terminal tackle I use, why I use it, some of the things that I've changed since my first tackle talk, some of the things that I haven't changed, that I've continued to use and had success with, and how I use them, why I use them, and really what I use them for. So with this tackle talk, probably the easiest place for me to begin is split rings. I use the Stealth Tackle where and when I can get them, the stainless steel number 6 and number 7s. And I use them on all my baits. I use the split ring connection. I trust it more than anything. I don't tend to trust snaps. Snaps have failed, not necessarily for me. They've been close to failing for me. I just feel more secure with the split ring connection. I use Stealth Tackle split rings on pretty much the nose of all of my baits, which does get kind of expensive at times, but at the same time I haven't had any failures there either. Sometimes I will swap out Stealth Tackle split rings for split rings on baits like Medusas or Bam Bams, depending on if those split rings get damaged or whatever. Actually, Brady might use Stealth Tackle on the Bam Bams to start with, so I'm not sure on that one. Don't quote me. Brady can confirm or deny on that one. But like, for example, the top lines, they don't come with split rings, so I put Stealth on all of those. So that being said, Stealth are generally the split rings I use. They're what I rig all of my bucktails with when I get them from KV or Johnny. So yeah, those are what I use primarily. I've gotten some from Kevin Abendroth, who does Pandemonium Tackle. So these black ones that he uses here, I use those from time to time as well. I don't know the brand name of those, but they are, for me, a more cost-effective option when you're talking about rigging lots of bucktails, putting split rings on the noses of all your lures, all of the things. It can get kind of expensive at times. So with that said, I featured Stealth Tackle in the first one. As far as their split rings go, I'm not affiliated with Stealth Tackle in any way, shape, or form. I just have faith in what they do. And yeah, they were in the first one. I still use them when I can now. If they're available, that's what I use. So, and that's what I prefer. So from split rings, let's move to leaders, and then we'll kind of move to hooks. I've got baits here and some hooks here and things to talk about related to that in line as well. So with leaders, there's only 2 types of leaders that I use outside of the Pandemoniums. So I use the Pandemonium Roswell leaders for 95% of my applications. So again, going to the Stealth Tackle leaders, these are the ones that I use. This is the spring leader. I use this again for a lot of my smaller applications. Smaller dive and rise, smaller twitches, rattle traps, the stuff in the spring that, or smaller glides even at times, the stuff in the spring that at times these leaders will weigh down too much and affect the action. That's where I lean on the Stealth. That said, I pretty much use the 9-inch Pandemonium Roswell leaders for everything else. So the 7-inch Roswells I use for my bucktails and my swim baits. Anything moving horizontally, or spinner baits, anything moving horizontally I use the 7-inch for. I think this season I didn't need to change out the leader on my bucktail rod once, which again, the Pandemonium ones generally are a little more expensive. I understand that, but the longevity of those leaders that you get out of them, it will pay for itself time and time over. Where, you know, these leaders will kink, and I don't have a lot of faith after they get a really bad kink in them. The Pandemonium ones don't generally do that. Again, I retie those leaders a lot, but generally speaking, the way that I know if one of these leaders is quote unquote done is when the shrink tubing around the crimps is starting to show. That's when I generally change those leaders out. I don't, I try to be good about it. It just kind of depends. And I've had just a couple fail, but those were prototypes, and Kevin and I have talked about that, but I think that those are getting amended and not available to the general public. The 9s in the wire that he uses, these have been bulletproof for me over the last 5 years, 6 years, I don't know. But like I said, I've used the 7 inches, the 7-inch ones for my bucktail horizontal baits. Since that time, I've used the 9-inchers and the 12-inchers for dive and rise, plastics, twitches, whatever. That's what I've used for. The only other one that I use at times from Stealth is the walk the dog leaders. But that's only for certain walk the dogs. If it's a smaller, more subtle one, I'll use these ones. If it's just a normal, like a Rabska or something, that's the buoyancy isn't affected by the denser leader, then I'll just stick to the Pandemonium because I don't really care. So I know that's not really helpful, but like maybe a Chaos Bubba, that might be affected, so I'd probably lean on this. You know, if you're talking like a giant Weagle, like a 10-inch Weagle, it's probably not gonna be affected, so I'll probably use this. It just kind of depends. You gotta fit the application for what you know, with what you're trying to do. Okay, so that kind of runs down the leaders. Let's talk about line, and then we'll move to hooks. So the line that I run Barbarian Braid. Alex and I have worked together for the last few years now. I love this stuff. The 90 pound, you could pretty much rock climb with this stuff and be okay. The 80 pound is definitely more supple. It's easier to use. I use the 50 pound gold for my downside stuff. For my bass stuff at times, or will use it for my bass stuff more often here in the future, and pike. The 80 I really like. I pretty much ran the 80 exclusively this year, both on my my rubber setup, my dive and rise twitch setup, my bucktail setup, and I had no issues with it at all. The 90 I pretty much ran on my live bait setups exclusively. Again, no issues at all. I guess I did run, I ran the 90 on the reel that was on my Moab, so like for the heaviest applications that I run, so like my regular size Bam Bams, my 10-inch Ridgways, literally the biggest stuff in my tackle box. That's what I'm using the 90 for. Everything else I pretty much run the 80 exclusively. Okay, so let's chat about hooks. So the first ones that I'll talk about here, these are the ones that I usually rig my bucktails with. It just kind of depends. Sometimes I'll rig them with the BKKs. Sometimes I'll rig them with the VMCs. I don't know why it's struggling to focus on that. There we go. So these are the VMC high carbon. You can see that the price tag is included there. I was only able to find these 6/0s at the Musky shop recently, so that's why I got them. But again, I really like these VMC high carbons. I use the 5/0s, I use the 6/0s, and I use the 7/0s on these. They're really great. They hold a point and they stay sticky for a really long time. I've rigged the majority of my Dadsons with these, and they're not so terrible that they don't break the bank. When and where I can, I use the BKKs, but the more cost-effective option that I've had really good luck with and success over the last few years would be the VMC high carbons. So these things have been awesome. You know, again, the way that I'm rigging these, I'm matching the size of the hook to the size of the presentation that I'm utilizing with it. I've also used these a lot on my Ridgways. I've had really good luck using the high carbons on my Ridgways, where I feel like I want a bigger hook down there just because it's a larger bait. And generally speaking, I've used these on rubber, like on heli dogs. I'll usually change them out for the high carbons. I know that Brady uses the high carbons standard with his bow fins, and I've upgraded his hook choices with my own, which is not an indictment on Brady's hook choices. He puts 5/0 or 7/0 on his bow fins, and swim fins, depending on the size. He puts good hooks on his stuff. You don't need to change them out unless you're just an absolute snob like me. That is not a critique on Brady. That is me being a little OCD, if I'm being 100% honest. But Brady and I have talked about this before, and how much I appreciate him for putting on quality components on his lures, so then that way I don't have to spend time in the winter changing the stuff out because it's already done for me. So that's the start of my hook obsession. Again, how much the hooks matter, I think hooks matter a lot, if I'm being 100% honest. And with that being said, I started using, this is probably the one that I switch out the most when I can. These are ST36s. These are owners. They're great hooks. They've got a really wide gap to them. One of the biggest muskies I've ever caught, I would not have caught if it weren't for these hooks, because they're sharp and they are wide. So there's that. These things are phenomenal. I use them on pretty much all my deuces, or I will use a different hook, which I'll talk about later. I use them on what I used to use on my toads. I've used them on Ridgways. Speaking in terms of deuces, especially the mid-sized deuces, putting better hooks on those deuces have probably increased my hookup percentage anywhere between 25 and 35%. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go out and change the Chaos hooks. Those hooks are fine. The owners are just better. The owners are expensive. I do not discount that. It's all about how much you value the time that you're putting in on the water to get the result that you want. So for me, it's an easy choice to make. Maybe some people, it's not quite as easy. So you're probably wondering, if I use the ST36s on that, what is on this? So this is actually the Deusa that I've caught my biggest Wisconsin muskie with on the Chippewa flowage. This has ST, I think these are 58s. These are saltwater, like tuna hooks or whatever. They're incredibly sharp, and they have a triangular point to them. They are not cheap at all, and they are very sturdy. If you see my my Dipstick XL, it has the bigger version of these on, because they run a little bit bigger. Like these are 2/0s, they're about the size of a 3, which is cool. And the 3/0s are about the size of a 5. So that's why I use them on those bigger baits and those bigger presentations. Does it matter? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But I will say, when I hooked into that freaking pig on the Chippewa flowage, I was happy that I had these hooks on and he stayed pinned. So I don't know. They're incredibly sharp. They are more expensive, and I use them where I can. I've had very good luck with the ST58s. I actually usually get those on Tackle Warehouse. Moving on to the ST, what are these? These are the STY35s. So these are a 2/0 teed out hook. I use them on deuces. I use them on Rusty's Customs, as you can see here. They've got the T, and I really like that because it makes the profile wider than the bait, the hook profile, which allows, in my opinion, better hookups. I really like the square, how it lays on the Deusa more, because those hooks just kind of stick out a little bit more and give it a little bit more tackiness that can kind of latch onto the fish's face. Again, when I started using those hooks, I started netting a lot more fish on the mini deuces. This is like the OG, this is the OG Eagle Deusa that I had, the first one I bought, the mini. And this thing has so many fish on it. It's got my biggest mini Deusa fish at 43 inches on it, and these hooks have stood the test to some of those big fish. And I think it's important to upgrade hooks at times when you can. The other type of owner that I use, I think these are the ST48s. They're very similar to the 58s, but they're not quite the same. But this is a Topline, kind of one of his trolling baits. I tried casting it. It's not really much of a caster, definitely more of a troller. But I've teed out a couple of them. I've left a couple of them the same. I like the beefiness of the hook, especially for the fish that we're targeting, and just like the wider profile for those fish to potentially get hooked on. In terms of hook upgrades, so I talked about the bowfin before. This is one of my chewed and abused sucker ones that Brady doesn't like to make because it's got 3 colors, but you can see the face is pretty much ripped off. I've caught, I think, at least 2 muskies on this one. It just kind of depends. Like, I've got bowfins that I've gotten 7 fish on, and I've got bowfins that I've gotten like 2 fish on. It's just the nature of plastic lures. Like, if they headhunt it and just absolutely shoot it in the face, it might not last as long. That's just the nature of the beast. I mean, you can weld it and all the things. It's just plastic is plastic is plastic. Like, sometimes, you know, I've gotten a dozen fish on a singular Deusa, and I've gotten a fish on a Deusa. It just kind of depends on how they crack it. Anyway, that said, this particular one has 2 of the 3/0 ST36s. There are times where I really like to put a BKK 4/0 spear in the front for those ones that head shoot it. I picked that one up from Gus. I can't take credit for that. So the ones that I've started using recently, most of this stuff is stuff that I've been using for years. The BKKs are new. I've got to give KV and Justin Regan props for introducing me to the BKKs. These were not really on my radar before. I don't really know why. Kevin Abendross started using them more for his stuff in the past couple of years as well, which should have turned me on to it. But I really like these a lot. They're basically a bigger version of the Owner ST36s. I use them on bucktails. I use them on a variety of baits. For example, I've started using them on the Ridgways, where you just get a bigger hook, a bigger profile for these bigger baits. So there's things that you know, they can catch on. So I've got a BKK 4/0, a BKK 4/0, and then I've got one of those Owner ST48s right in the middle there. So there's plenty of really sharp hooking profile that those fish can just get their faces caught on. So I really like this Ridgway, by the way. This thing runs awesome. It's kind of shallow. It doesn't get super deep. It just runs right in that zone that I like. Anyway, it's also a color I really like too. The Night Eye, the Golden Eye, money. Hard to beat those. But I really like the 4/0, the BKKs. This is the hook that was on my Baby Bad Egg that I used a ton. I was able to just absolutely wrench on some of those fish that ate at the boat. You'll see that footage from Canada at some point when I get around to it. But the BKKs are awesome. The 5/0s I use for like the biggest stuff, the biggest blades, the biggest baits. KV's got a bait called the Ostrich Egg coming out, basically a 13-14 combo, and these things are awesome on it just because of that bigger profile. I've got a really big blade with no name, which is Dadson double 13s. I use 2 5/0 BKKs on that. You know, single big profile, I'll use the 5/0 BKKs. Big plastic, like my regular Deuces, I've started running the 5/0 BKKs on those, just because I feel like it's a better hook. I've struggled with hookups at times on those, and that might just be user error. I don't know. And again, sometimes to kind of wrap this all up with a bow, I do sometimes utilize different profiles of hooks for the bait itself. So for example, this is a Poseidon swim bait. I've got a 3/0 in the front. I've got a 2/0 ST36 in the back. I've got upgraded splits because these are originally designed for bass, but I don't like to mess around. So I'll do that sometimes with my rubber lures as well. In fact, what I prefer with the Bam Bams is a BKK 4/0 in the front and a 3/0 ST36 in the back. It's all just trial and error. You just got to do what you are confident in and feel good about. Good hooks, good quality components are not cheap. I cannot emphasize that enough. But that at the same time should not dissuade you from seeking those out, because again, it is your connection to the fish. When you are only getting maybe one shot in a day, you've got to capitalize. And if that variable is the quality of your hook, the quality of your split ring, the quality of your leader, then I think that that is a small price to pay to put that fish in the bag. Details matter. I think it was like Lombardi that said football is a game of inches. Well, musky fishing is a game of millimeters. And sometimes the smallest little details really do matter. That's just my take. I know a lot of people have been asking me to go over my terminal tackle. So there it is. If you have questions or need clarifications, please let me know. There was a lot of information packed into that short little spiel. So I'll be glad to break down anything or clarify anything else. I do not have any affiliation with any hook company, any hook manufacturer. This is all just trial and error and the things that I like. The reason I use Pandemonium leaders and the reason Kevin and I work so well together is because I started using these and they were freaking bulletproof from day one. And there's no reason for me to not use them ever. So that being said, I appreciate all of the people that I work with for putting these wonderful, wonderful tools in my hands. And yeah, if you have questions or need clarification, please do not hesitate to drop a comment. If you'd be so kind, consider subscribing. Good luck in 25. Feels weird to say, but I hope you guys have an awesome season and a wonderful off season, spending some time with your family over the holidays, as that is what I am doing right now. But with all that said, I'll see you out on the water and catch you in the next one. Peace out.